Hey everyone, welcome to this guide on the melody dictation settings in my app. If you're new here, this app helps you train your ear to figure out melodies by ear. Super useful for musicians, singers, or anyone wanting better relative pitch. The app comes with lots of pre-made training presets, and I really recommend starting with those. Spend a little time finding the level that challenges you but doesn't overwhelm you. But if none of the presets feel quite right, or you're curious about what makes some levels harder than others, this settings page lets you customize everything. Today, in part 1, we'll cover the basic settings: key, note choice, and lock starting note. In part 2, we'll dive into the advanced stuff like large interval, occasional large interval, and occasional notes. Besides walking you through each setting, I'll also share some practical tips to help you figure out melodies faster and more accurately. Let's jump in. First up, the key section. By default, it's set to random. And honestly, this is perfect for almost everyone. It doesn't mean every question has a random key. Instead, the app picks one random key for the entire training session, say 10 questions, then picks a new one for the next session. Why do we do it this way? Because in real songs, the melody almost always stays in the same key, unless you're listening to jazz or fusion, which loves modulation. Keeping the key consistent within a session helps train your ear the way it works in actual music. Next, note choice. This is where you decide which notes can appear in the melodies. We strongly encourage using solfege, do, re, mi, etc., or scale degrees 1, 2, 3, because that's the most reliable way to recognize melodies. That's why you can toggle between solfege and number display. Choose whichever you're more comfortable with. The questions will match whatever you pick. You can also choose whether in between notes show as sharps or flats. If you're working within a specific scale or mode, use the Select from Scales mode dropdown. It's a fast way to pick all the right notes at once. And if you want to start fresh, just hit clear. Last for today, lock starting note. This one's pretty straightforward. When enabled, every melody in the session starts on the same note, the one you choose from your note choice. When it's disabled, each melody starts on a random note from your selected note choice. We added this option because starting every phrase on do, or always knowing the starting note, makes things much easier, especially at the beginning. It helps you lock in the tonal center, that strong root note feeling. Why does that matter? Let me show you a common mistake. See? You can hear the intervals perfectly, 2 major seconds ascending, but without knowing where do is, you can't tell if it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, or sol, la, ti. Now let's hear the root note along with the melody. There it is. Suddenly it's clearly sol, la, ti. Locking the starting note removes that confusion while you're building confidence. Use it if you need to, there's no shame in it, but over time, try turning it off. Eventually, you'll want to train without it so you can handle real melodies that don't always start on do. You might be wondering, when melodies start on a random note, how do you figure out where the root do actually is? Here are some practical tips. First, in this app, always click the root and melody button for the very first question in a session. Early questions often don't have enough notes to reliably guess the tonal center. If you get the first question right, try to hold the root note in your memory before moving to the next one. Root note, root note. Got it. Next question. The root and melody button will change to melody button after the first question. But if you really forget, you can click root note button as a quick reminder, but try not to rely on it too much. This reminds me of something my guitar teacher, Dean Brown, always emphasized, though I ignored it for way too long. Whenever I got stuck on a melody, the first thing he'd ask was, "Do you still remember the root note?" Not the intervals, not the first note, just the root. Now I understand why. It's the foundation of everything. When figuring out melodies from real songs, it's often best to find the root note before tackling the first phrase. Most apps, including mine, can't fully train this skill. You need real music to train this skill. Here are two common approaches. Approach 1. Build the scale from the melody notes. Listen to the melody, catch a few notes, then try arranging them into an ascending-descending scale in your mind. Sing that imagined scale against the song's harmony, adjusting until it fits perfectly. Once the scale feels solid, the root usually becomes obvious. Here's how I try approach 1. Catch a few notes, then try to sing them up and down in your mind.
La 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 la.
Here is the root note. Once the scale feels solid, the root usually becomes obvious in your mind. Approach 2. Find the root from the harmony. Many pop songs start on the one chord, the root chord. Some people can hear the root directly in that first chord. I can't do that reliably yet, so I use a slight variation. I imagine scale notes over the harmony until one locks in perfectly. Again, once the scale feels solid, the root usually becomes obvious. Here's how I try approach 2. Let's try singing the scale notes against the song's harmony.
La 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 la
Once the scale feels solid, the root usually becomes obvious in your mind. For this two methods, you use whichever jumps out first in the song, or blend them. Over time, your ear learns to do both at once. Actually, this is what I normally do on an instrument to figure out a melody. But instead of playing it on an instrument, I just do it with my inner voice. One last tip. If you're ever trying to figure out a melody from a real song and just can't pin down the root note, here's a practical workaround. Grab your instrument and work out the first phrase along with the root there first. Once you've got it locked in, go back to listening and try the rest of the melody purely by ear. It's a great way to build confidence while still pushing your ear. That's it for part 1. These 3 settings, key, note, choice, and lock starting note, give you a ton of control to create the perfect practice for your current level. In part 2, we'll get into the more advanced stuff, how we control interval size, how to handle occasional big jumps, and some powerful strategies to master them, and the occasional notes feature. If you found this helpful, give it a like, drop a comment with your biggest ear training struggle, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Thanks for watching, now go practice, and I'll see you in the next one.